The origin story being that I was a director of marketing in a software company, and we realized we were creating all this content and our sales team wasn't using it. And so I began to ask why. It's because they what marketing was creating didn't match the pains that sales was having, and they weren't really involved in the process. And so I began creating content by recording conversations with the sales team, with the executives, and suddenly some magic began to happen where they began being more interested in the content and less of a situation of them ignoring the content. So that's the origin story of this. And I want to share that with you today, along with some things that have progressed even since then. So the goal was to get them to say, look what we did, because you are one revenue team. And so if we can act as one and get that sales team or the sales team members to go to a we versus a us versus them, then now they can celebrate with you when you have your content wins. So how do we get from looking at it as us marketing and them sales and getting it to a we win? We all know the scenario of being called the make it pretty department. Here's a PowerPoint. Here's, a trade show booth to create. When we do that, the cost shows up fast. The budget gets cut as soon as they need to cut budgets. The trade show booth all of a sudden, or that PowerPoint doesn't seem quite as important. The reps rebuild their own content because they want content that speaks to what they're working on. And then also some deals may stall for reasons we might not even know why. In fact, one of those reasons we do know why is because the marketing content didn't meet the customer at a key decision point in the deal. Marketers aren't thinking close enough about the deal conversation. So the main problem is that marketers, we tend to measure attention. Things like vanity metrics like visits and form fills and downloads and views. While at the same time, sales has their other metrics. You may have heard their methodologies like BANT or MEDIC, and they're looking for intent. And if our marketing content doesn't help to contribute to that, then there's going to be a disconnect. So marketing is already in the deal conversation from day one, even before marketers know who this person is, before sales gets in contact with them. And so this handoff model we used to have is dead. We have statistics behind that. You've seen them before, even Gartner saying that the amount of the entire buying journey a B2B marketer customer spends is, with all vendors combined, is only 17%. And only 5% of that is with the sales team. And then you take the other side of that and the buyer journey is over before a buyer ever contacts sales by amount of 70%. They've already been working and researching before they contact our sales to book a meeting. And so the old scoreboard of the handoff model is dead, and marketing, we know, is with the customer long before sales, and even often marketing is aware of that. So what we have to do is, of course, trade those old metrics for the buyer's answers. Things like, how did you first start researching about the topic or about us? What have you read or watched about us or of our content before reaching out? How long have you been looking into us or a solution? Once you hear those answers and sales stops calling it marketing content and they start seeing it as we content. In other words, when you collect those kinds of answers, sales begins to see the value in the content that you're creating and the answers that you're using to create that content. So I've been thinking a lot about the state of attribution lately, and the new model will be to gather unstructured data from conversations and use AI to understand that unstructured data and report on it and gain direction. So that's a notable milestone of where we're at right now. If your customers ever report to you they've been consuming your content for months, once a salesperson hears that, that's a signal to a salesperson that says, oh, you've been consuming my content for months, then that means that marketing is doing something to contribute to the sales process. So as marketers, we have to figure out how to capture these comments, ask sales to be tuned in to hear these kind of comments, because that means your marketing is doing its job. So don't worry about how messy that collection of data is, because before, now I was a marketing operations person. We used to want clean fields with clean drop downs and clean data. But now we have AI to help us sort it out, understand it, and report on it. So don't be afraid of those open fields that just say, how did you learn about us? That's another way of direction we're going now with our attribution. If you're a marketer struggling to create content that's truly unique to your brand, here's the key. Your experts and executives are your most valuable content assets. Conversational content like videos and podcasts featuring your team stand out above all other content. So instead of creating content that sounds just like your competition, start leveraging the unique voices inside your company. Thought leaders and authentic conversations build credibility and engagement. At Content Monster, we specialize in remote content production, meaning we coach your people to be comfortable on camera, then we capture and produce high-quality videos and podcasts featuring your team and customers. No need for expensive production crews, long production plans, or complex setups. Want to see how it works? Visit contentmonster.com today to learn more. So, where do we start? If we want to get sales to say, look what we did, because we know that when that we happens, the work as a co-owner of the content for sales begins, and sales will protect what they own. So the goal is to have them as part of your content creation so they won't ignore it because it is their part of their work. And we know that the content gold already sits in those conversations that your sales reps are having. So they already have the raw material. They have the objections that happen. In other words, they talk to a customer. They hear when the customers push back. They hear the friction. They hear who the competition is. They hear new things that marketing may not be in tune to yet because they're talking to the customer in real time. They hear the questions the customers ask. They ask it and they ask it in a certain language. In other words, the questions the customers ask may be in terminology that marketing isn't using because we're often self-centered about how we talk about our market or about our products. We want to hear what the customer calls it. What did they ask? What questions do they ask before they even decide? And then also their stories. What do they say about what happened before they chose us? Or why did they say no? Once we get sales to support content creation, we'll be able to extract this kind of information and then supply them with content that answers these questions, helps them in the sales process. Because again, sales protects content when they see their own fingerprints in it. When they recognize their own pains, when they recognize the familiar objections, when they can use content to answer customer questions, when they have something they can easily send to a customer, the moment that call ends, it becomes more and more valuable to them. So how do we do this? Well, we don't want to ask sales to write content. In fact, I don't want to give anybody any guilt here, but give me an emoji or a hand clap if you've ever had to ask sales to help with writing your content. And I wonder, I don't want to criminalize anybody, but I wonder how that worked out. Because it's difficult to ask sales to create content. So give me a hand clap if you've tried it, if it's been difficult, if you've seen the pain. So here's some ways to help get through that. First of all, don't interrogate sales. Because if you interrogate them, it's like it's for marketing purposes and it's for helping you in marketing do your job. It doesn't sound like it's helping sales do their job. So you don't want to give them marketing tasks or ask them to write, or this is what I see often, you set content quotas for the sales team. Even when it comes from the CFO or the VP of sales down to your sales team, and you say, we want you to contribute X number of pieces of content per month, they won't want to do it. And now with AI, they will resent it and they'll hand in some AI slop and you end up doing more work. So don't do that. What you want to do instead is be inquisitive about their struggle with their job. You're their teammate. You're a part of their revenue team. You're on the same team. So ask what those objections are that they hear. Set regular meetings with them and communicate to find out what customers say before the yes or the no. Build content for those exact moments that they're experiencing. So you want to frame sales as the source of your content, not the author. You do the building, but use sales as the source of the content you create that in turn becomes a tool for sales. In other words, hey, sales, help me help you. It's more about them. And by the way, sales loves to talk. If they're a good salesperson, they probably love to talk. So use that. Ask the questions. Have that conversation. You'll learn things. Not only will you learn what objections they're hearing, but you also learn the customer's language. You may be selling or marketing a widget 3000. Meanwhile, the customer says, I just want a wrench. Find out how your customers talk and use that in the content, and your salespeople know that. So when you approach your sales team, you want to lead with respect, not a content factory. So treat them as the authority on closing the deal. Give them that respect. Let them understand that the content you're creating is specifically to help them close deals. Be their deal closing partner, not an information burden. And once you do that, the posture shifts the whole collaboration. The tone matters. So reps open up when they feel respected as the experts that they are, whether it be expert in the subject matter or expert in selling. So here's some steps. First, you want to pick the representative or the salesperson and the deal stage. You don't want to try to solve the whole funnel in one interview or one piece of content. Pick a stage. So the steps are, think about the stages that you're solving for and do it in buckets. Let's say, for example, you're talking about an early stage. You want to find out what the objections you're hearing are. If it's a mid-stage deal, find some proof about what you're trying to sell and your value points. And then if it's a late stage, find some trust factors and help them close the deal because you're building content they can use to send to that prospect to say, I know this prospect maybe has some trust issues. They may need some more proof. Let me send this content that marketing created with us to help push that deal across the line. So here's that workflow at a glance. First, select the representative or salesperson or subject matter expert you want to work with. And then pick the deal stage that you're going to target that content for at the moment. All right. So this ensures you have content designed to cover the full buying process if you start off creating content for each stage. And so you want to repeat this process over several deals across the buying stages. The next step is an interview. Sit down with your sales leaders, your salespeople, your subject matter experts. Do an interview. This is where a lot of our clients do it by internal podcasts, even external podcasts or customer podcasts. They have these conversations, whether they're intended to be public or not. They have the conversations, they record these conversations. And then, because it's a conversation, you can build from their words. You can find out the actual language that resonates with your sales team, not what marketing creates around a product or around your brand or around your industry. You need words that your salespeople use in real sales conversations. And then you return by creating content with their fingerprints. What I mean by fingerprints is they should recognize, oh, this is a pain I actually had. This is an objection I hear all the time. Or better yet, this piece of content came from me. This piece of content came from something we discussed in a sales meeting. Or you could even name that salesperson by name by saying, one of our experts experienced this, and this is what we think you should do. Use their names even. That gives them more buy-in to the process. Marketers and sales leaders, if you want to close more deals and drive real revenue growth, you need cash. And I don't mean money. I'm talking about my new book, Cash, The 4 Keys to Better Sales, Smarter Marketing, and a Supercharged Revenue Machine. It gives you a proven framework to improve the 4 areas that impact revenue the most: communication, alignment, systems, and honesty. You need a stronger sales and marketing engine, and this book will show you how to build it. Get your copy now at aleejudge.com/cash. Now, back to the content. So, step 2 is you want to run this interview. You create an interview with short 15, 20 minutes. You want to respect their time. You use the same questions on every set, so you have a regular cadence and your output is comparable across different conversations. And again, it's important to record it. Capture the exact words, not summaries. This is where conversation and open form fields work better than what we used to have in terms of drop-down fields and things that don't get to the exact language that's being used. So capture the conversation, use the transcript to guide you because you're mining deal stage insight. You're not scripting anything or like a webinar. You want them to tell the actual stories unfiltered in their language. You want to hear their language and the customer's language. Then the next 2 steps are to build it from their words, use their objections, they say, their stories to become the proof. and then return it with their credit. Again, like I mentioned earlier, it doesn't hurt to put their name in it, because if they see their experiences, they're going to trust it. They're going to defend this content. Imagine that, having a sales team defending marketing's content. And then, of course, they're going to use it because they're involved in it. And then on top of that, you can even build FOMO amongst the sales team that goes, wow, I was heard, or my colleague was heard in the content. I want to be in that too. They want to have their voice heard and their voice used in the content. And then salespeople begin sharing that content because it's useful. And they also are going to see other people involved in the content as well. So it doesn't hurt to build a little bit of FOMO in that as well. Now, this workflow only works if the interview pulls the right material. And I want to arm you with a tool and a framework to make sure that you're not having this loose conversation. You want to have a conversation with a purpose and with a framework. And so the framework that we use is called the POET framework. It's a framework that makes sure you get the right questions and the right answers out of your sales team. So I'm going to give you a tool in a moment that you can actually input where you're going, what you're trying to achieve, what content you want to maybe improve that you already have, to make sure that it passes this POET framework test. And POET stands for, first, proof. What's the actual evidence that what you're selling works, that your service actually works? And then the opinion. When you talk to a salesperson, you're going to understand what their opinion is of how it's used, how it should be used, how your product works. You're going to hear stories about what the opinions of your customers are. What does your salesperson believe? What do they stand for? And then the experience. Tell me about a real deal. Tell me about a process a customer went through, why they chose us, what their objections were. As a salesperson, what did you have to explain or re-explain? What's your experience in selling this product or service? And then with those things, you get trust. Like, what makes a buyer actually believe in your service or your product? So that's the POET framework: proof, opinion, experience, and trust. And these answers ensure that your content will not be the same as your competitors. They'll not be the same as AI, and they will reflect real scenarios in your organization and not just marketing fluff that marketing thought up that may not reflect what the salespeople actually need. And so, extracting knowledge is only half the win. POET gets the insight out of sales. POET makes sure that you have content that sales will actually use. Now, once you have this content, you have these questions, and you have the real meat of what you need to include in your content, I have another model I want to show you. It's called the RevCode model. And this was developed because content has to follow to revenue. As content marketers, we're trying to make sure that we prove our value, that we connect content to revenue. And this is where the RevCode model comes in. The model consists of 4 different frameworks. I'm going to go deeper on one of them, but the 4 frameworks are SOS, which is your engine, your design engine. Like, why are we creating this? Should it even exist? Why does it exist? That's a framework which you can find later on. Voice is a framework which is saying who in our organization should be talking to this topic so that our customers trust it. And then ready, which is what we're talking about today, is the content usable in real sales conversation? And then the last one is trace. How do we trace the influence of this content back to revenue over time? Now, today, again, we're talking about ready. Is our content passing the ready test? Is it ready to be used in real sales conversations? So let's go through the ready framework to make sure the content you're creating is ready, because if it doesn't pass this, then maybe it's not quote unquote ready to be given to sales as a tool. The first thing is, of course, is it relevant? Is it tied to buyer questions and objections? Now, of course, we may have brand content, but we're talking about, is this content going to be used by our sales team? And if it's not relevant to their daily goals, then no, it won't be. It has to be relevant. Is it easy to share? This is a big one. Sales has to be able to easily access and send this content without friction or having to research or having to contact marketing. Give me a hands up or a thumbs up if you've ever had to field sales from calls from sales that says, hey, did we have a white paper on this? Or do we have any content on that? I need to find out where it's at. Well, it's good that they're asking. Give them a celebration for asking, but it's on us as marketers to make sure it's easy to share. And that doesn't mean asking sales to log in to some new platform or some new CMS. If they're not already in that system regularly, we're adding friction by asking them to log into that. The next part is answers. Does it speak to the buying decision? Not just awareness, but does it speak to the journey that your customer is in and they're at decision points? Sales knows what these decision points are. Can they pull your content, send it out to someone and say, I know you're trying to decide between this and that. Here's some content that will help you make that decision. Does it de-risk? You know, you've bought things before. At some point, you're like, okay, this feels a little risky. Do I want to spend this money? What are my trade-offs? Why do I expect this solution versus that solution, this product versus that product? You want to de-risk the decision that your customer is making, and your content should do that. And sales will appreciate if they can release that pressure valve by sending some content to say, hey, let me help you make this decision. And then finally, does it yield momentum? Does it help move the deal to a closer or to a clearer step? That's a bonus. So ready is the operational test for sales-ready content. If an asset fails these, then it's not useful to sales. And that interview workflow plus the poet is how you produce content that passes the ready test. And when it's ready, sales not only wants to use it, they want to contribute to creating it. I want to give an example of a client of ours who we record their video for them in their podcast, but we also help them go through their strategy of creating the right content. And in this case, this client, they have a network of independent agencies that sell across the country. And their challenge was that they needed to have content to help their experts who work across many different risk management and educational areas. In other words, you may have a salesperson in one area that's an expert in this and another salesperson that's expert in that, but they're not able to share that information. So they wanted to be able to create a catalog of content that was enable them to have a vehicle for sharing that expertise. So let me let you hear directly from them.
We work with a network of independent agencies across the country. All they do, they're pounding the pavement every day to speak with ministries and other organizations about their insurance needs. But the truth is they're experts in a lot of risk management areas and educational areas that if ministries just slowed down and listened to them, they would get a lot out of just that conversation. And so what this does for us is it takes the expertise of that network of independent agencies and it gives a vehicle for sharing it that then they can be in anyone's office or anybody's car or wherever they would need to be with just the sending of a link. And so it just, for us, it bottles up their expertise. And then we're able to say to our internal teams, to our other agents, we got a great resource for you. And now you've got the expertise of this, this person on mission travel or this person on schools, and you can take it with you to the next person you talk to.
So what you're seeing there is their sales team and the marketing team are working together and they're able to say, look what we did. This is what sales says when the content win is theirs too. And there's so much, the best part of that story for me is I love to hear that there's FOMO building between sales members because they're like, this company has a queue of people. They're lined up to be on this show because they want to contribute their expertise and because they know they're using this expertise in their sales process. So this is content that marketing is creating, but the core of that content, the meat of that content is coming from the sales team, from real situations, from real people in the field, and it provides them with an outlet to express their opinion and their expertise. And so the marketers are able to extract the knowledge, the day-to-day experiences, the daily struggles that matter the most to sales, and what they're getting is the ability to use sales teams' proof, opinion, experience, and trust factors to include them in the content. And when you do that, your content will not be ignored. Your sales team will love you for it. They'll love the content and they will be happy to participate in that content. Now, I've got a couple of tools I mentioned earlier. One is the Poet interview generator. Basically, we use that to take our existing content. I know some of you guys have content that was created by AI in 2022, 2023, and 4 that did the job of filling up your content calendar, but maybe it's not quite the quality it needs to be. So take that content, feed it into this. It'll output questions, and they're going to be tough questions. I admit they're tough questions to go back to your SMEs, your executives, your sales team. Ask them these questions, get the answers out from them, and then you put those answers, you rework those articles and even the service pages on your website, rework them with this proof, opinion, experience, and trust that comes from your team to make that content better. And then RevCode, there's a content score actually. You can use that tool to see how well you're working your content to be tied to revenue. You want to make sure your content generates and is tied to and is made for the purpose of moving revenue forward. And that will give you a score and tell you maybe some areas you want to work on and give you some insight as to why your content maybe is getting ignored by sales and what you can do to make sure your content is tied closer to revenue. All right, that's my time right there. We have time for some questions. I don't want to end the conversation or relationship here. So here's all the ways to contact me. I have my direct email right there. I live on LinkedIn. You can always find me there. And you can either just do the quick connect link there to get into my world and receive the newsletters and those things. But the main thing is I don't want to end the conversation there. I want to make sure that we're still working together and then we still have a chance to keep talking. I love sharing. I'm passionate about sales and marketing. And as you can see, it pushed me to write a whole book about it when I left corporate. So I was seeing this friction between sales and marketing. I had so much to get out of my head on how do I make sales and marketing work better together. And so I spent the next year after leaving corporate writing this book. And so now I get a chance to spend time with you like this and share conversations. So I'm done. Let's have some conversation and some questions.